All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Ahmed Flex Omar. I'm the Deputy Director, CXO for MALA, the Muslim American Leadership Alliance. This is part two of our Future of Work C series, Real Talk. And this series was born out of Chicago's Ideas Week. And we're happy to have you all today. And we have an exciting conversation for you all. Just tell you guys a little bit about Mala. Mala is a storytelling organization, but we're also part of the UN. We sit on the UN's Economic and Social Council. So I'm sure a lot of you see the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the kind of stuff that our group, develops and meets with finance ministers from all over the world to see how we can make our planet and our world a better place. And we have a lot of folks from the fintech community with us today. The fintech community has always been very supportive of Mala. We actually started our work on global giving, and we've had so many individual donations through crowdfunding, and that really helped us scale the organization. And we just want to continually think about innovative ways to give back and work with different stakeholders. And I just want to also thank my co-founder for the series, Holly, for all our hard work and to bringing this project to life. And I want to pass the mic to her right now because she's going to be moderating our discussion today with our dear friend William. And yeah, Holly, I'll let you take it from here. And you're fintech famous, so I think most of the
Not
people.
yet. I'm working on it. There's one level. No, I have a rule. Is once I know someone that Jason Hendricks does not, then I will be closer. So fingers crossed that happens this year. But thank you so much, Flex, for bringing me into the world of Mala. I mean, you've really opened my eyes to just so much outside of my own comfort zone and just what, I didn't really even, I guess, even have a clue. Like, I mean, how different you and my childhoods were and how different our lives were growing up. But yet, I think the beautiful thing about it is what you've really taught me is that's why we are able to create such wonderful ideas and really able to try and, change the world. What's the Steve Jobs quote? Like, the people that, think that these people are crazy enough to think that they can change the world can, and I always think about you when I think about that. So thank you so much for providing us some background here today. And well, let's get started here with our discussion with William Charles Craigie. I almost called you Draper. Goodness, little nickname here almost slipped out. All right. So, William, welcome to the show. As mentioned, everyone, my name is Holly Marie Weckler. I'm a senior API FinTech Jedi, and I've been working with Flex for probably, what, 5 years now or so? Has it been? I
Yes.
think so. It was actually kind of funny, and this is like I think one of the great things about, as Flex mentioned, the Chicago Ideas Week and really the power of connections is Flex and I met, and William, we all met in WeWork Labs back once upon a time, and we all like was the first headquarters in Chicago, and it was that same idea, right? You're bringing together people from completely different backgrounds, completely different industries, and we all were put in kind of a computer lab type room and it's really actually blossomed benefits and a number of opportunities. So with that little background here, I'm going to pass the mic to William and ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. Thanks, Holly, Flex. Was really excited for this today because it's just a conversation amongst old friends and converging around some common themes that affect all of our businesses, really. But as Holly said, my name is William Kragie. I'm the CEO of Doppio Group for the last 3 years. Before that, I was VP of Sales. And before that, I worked here in Chicago. As you can see, I'm proud to show the Chicago skyline, or part of it, behind me, working here in financial services. So I think today, Holly, we're going to talk a little bit about that progression path, some tidbits I've picked up along the way, and really how Doppio Group as a supply chain technology integration and implementation services provider is sort of on the cusp or on the bleeding edge of the future of work, being a fully remote global team. And I'd be happy to share some of the things that I've learned along the way from managing a global team, trying to co-locate resources and consultants with our customers, and really in support of what I started in 2018 and 2019, which is building communities around our customers and consultants. And I think that's so much in alignment with the Mala mission of building community and telling the stories of those communities. So
I definitely agree. And we're going to get to that. But before we get to your, entrepreneurial life, I want to start back where, kind of where you were taking more of the traditional route. And when I was like looking through your LinkedIn earlier today, noticed, you went to some traditional schools, even were a tennis professional, it appears.
professional,
So maybe let's
not-
talk. Let's talk a little bit about, where you went to school and what you were studying and, what you thought back then. Because I know when I first graduated college, I was convinced that I was going to move to Europe. Well, I'm still trying to think about that, but Flex has said no. I was convinced I was going to move to Europe and I was going to pitch new business and advertising. I'm definitely not doing that. And I, absolutely love the world of fintech. So, it's definitely kind of interesting. I feel like some of the ideals that were just set from our, traditions, parents, where we grew up to where we are now. And, and as well as how we've reacted and pivoted in light of the pandemic. So before we dive into kind of where you are now and how you've been able to, react and really lead through this pandemic, let's learn a little bit about how you became the leader you are.
Sure. Thanks for that, Holly. To talk in the context of the global pandemic, currently we got to remember the last global crisis which we had, which was a financial crisis. I was coming through university at that time. I was in a Big Ten business program, very much interested in financial services, taking kind of a buttoned up approach to finance and learning the ropes of professional services, providing advisory services, investment advice, what have you. That's really where my focus was. I was fortunate enough to have an.
So what was that like? Like, is this going to work in Chicago 9 to 5? Like, give me like a day in the life. Like, you graduate college and you went to Invesco. So
Invesco was actually an internship.
Was it what you dreamed?
No, but it was, experience. I often give this advice is that career progression is like a process of elimination. You're working on finding out what you don't want to do. And coming out of the last financial crisis in 08, 09, 2010, being in a financial services business and seeing that it really lacked innovation, new processes, just innovative way to conduct business, it was really more of the same. And I had this gut feeling that, maybe I should move away from the finance and accounting route to more of what interested me in the business school, which was economic consulting, public policy analysis, and French. So trying to think with both sides of the brain. And I left that experience with Invesco, kind of focused on how do we add value instead of extract value. And then I parlayed that experience into municipal and healthcare banking at JP Morgan here in Chicago. And I had that same feeling, for the first couple.
How did you switch jobs? Did you get recruited or did you find, like, were you at Invesco? Like, what was kind of your decision to leave Invesco and move to JP?
Well, that was another internship experience. Being part of the Kellogg School in Indiana, they really pushed practical work experience and real world experience from day one.
So was that an externship?
No, that was a summer internship. And then after my junior year, I had a summer internship with JP Morgan, accepted a full-time offer. And it was in that full-time role for a period of 2.5, almost 3 years that I had this feeling, I had this calling that I wanted more sales and relationship management experience. I wanted to move into a consulting role, again, more about adding value and building better businesses versus extracting value from transactions. And I wanted to get closer to technology. I really felt some of my peers in the first couple of years outside of school were gaining more technical exposure and technical skill sets than what I had. And when the opportunity from a friend and founder of Doppio came knocking, I jumped at it because it really satisfied all three things.
You did not jump at it the first time you told me the story. I believe there was 3 times that you were approached.
Yeah.
If maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm remembering incorrectly.
No, Holly, you're right, and thanks for pressing that. It was, jumping from kind of the safety of a big company to a small startup in San Francisco was scary, especially early in your career. But it was the right opportunity because it was it satisfied 3 for 3 in the sense of consultative, technology driven, and very much focused on building long-term relationships. And that's really what enabled me to take over the business in 2017.
So let's talk about what you were doing when you first started. So, on your third time's a charm. And I actually got lucky because you sat right next to me in WeWork Lab. So I remember walking in that day seeing like, who is this? Someone's news here. Yeah. So what ended up it made you go over that kind of border, I guess, to decide to join the startup world. But it wasn't like you just jumped in and you were building deals and building relationships. I remember a bunch of PowerPoint decks and right. So talk a little bit about your time in the trenches, like, you know, so people, because you are quite a young, young guy to be a CEO at your age. So, you know, I think it's pretty inspiring for others to see that this can happen, right? If you're strategic and you put the work in and use your time, right? So maybe tell us a little bit about your time in the trenches. And I mean, I personally know the story of, you know, what happened with your partner and everything, but let's let our audience
I
in on
think,
the secret
you
too.
know, I was building on that analyst experience, which is critical. You really have to spend the time in the trenches to get exposure to as many deals as possible, as many industries as possible, and as much, you know, in many different technologies as possible. In the case of Doppio Group, that was my story. So you absolutely have to. What's that?
Sorry, with that, with explaining this answer kind of in the trenches, maybe you can, sorry to interrupt, but with explaining this, maybe you can also give us a little bit more light to what Doppio Group does, right? So being in the trenches, you say different technologies, et cetera. Like, you know, sometimes we get so used to our own industry that I know I use fintech acronyms all the time. I'm saying KYC and people are like, what? I'm like, oh, sorry. So why don't you give us a little bit of context of what Doppio Group does and, like, you know, the global supply chain management area is kind of what I would say high level, but you being the expert, I think this answer can kind of provide context to really what you're doing.
Yeah, it's funny you say KYC. KYC and AML were the things I wanted. Those were the processes I was running away from at the bank because it was so onerous to get deals done. But Doppio Group
That's what fintechs are trying to help, William.
Yeah, we are, simply put, systems integrators. We're partnered with the third largest business application publisher in the world called Infor. And we deliver services, professional services or project-centric services, as well as managed services, production support, helping customers monitor transactions flowing in and out of their system. But the common denominator across all of our customers in the US and Canada, and formerly Australia and New Zealand, before we closed our subsidiary there, was that they ran this system of record called Infor M3. It's an ERP system specialized for companies that make, move, or maintain goods.
ERP, do you want to give over what that acronym is?
Sure. It's a bit of an antiquated one, but enterprise resource planning. So think about a QuickBooks for your business, but as your business grows and has more complexity and requires more automation, you have multiple sites, you're a multimodal manufacturer and a distributor, you need a complex system that can really put a constraints-based model around how you conduct business.
Okay, thank you. That gives us like some nice context on this. Now, so going back to this, like kind of being in the trenches, from what I remember, and like I'm sure you can fill in a lot more details here, was you were working with your best friend or your partner from your fraternity, and then he started getting into some fundraising, which kind of opened up some opportunities for you. Is this kind of the path?
I'd say so. It was really a three-person leadership team: myself, Eric Monov, plus a couple solution architects here in the US, and largely an offshore organization in Bangalore. In 2016, we purchased office space, completed an office build out, and have been using that as our technical hub ever since. And that was because really largely the technical talent existed there. That's where the best resources in the world were. And in the United States, there was a huge gap for people that had technical skill sets. So we're different than, you know, business consultants that are doing process mapping or let's say finance, accounting, supply chain. We have those capabilities, but the core of our business has always been technology first.
So what do the people do that are in like, okay, what's the difference between someone that's US based versus your Bangalore based? So are you kind of like, you guys are putting technologists on site, or are you guys like solving you said the core base is technology. So I guess explain to me a little bit more about the difference between the different roles, I guess.
Yeah, so primary lines of business, professional services and managed services. We do most of our work on the basis of statements of work or quotes or estimates, and providing time materials or fixed fee quotes to build integrations between systems or to help implement software to automate a business process, which could be OCR or optical character recognition. How do we scan invoices and other documents like bills of lading and bring them in context into the system of record that governs all business processes? So in India, we have talented technical resources from junior to senior, all the way up to technical solution architects. And that we're really operating 24 hours a day around the world. I'm very proud in 2019 to have moved some of our resources from Bangalore, India to Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh, nice.
Again, about co-locating consultants with our customers and really building communities around our customers. So that's helped us and really expanded our capabilities and kind of pushed us into the next level of our operations.
So when you started at Doppio Group, how many people were there?
I think
So it was a 3-person leadership team, but how many?
Yeah, I think between the 3-person leadership team, our director in Australia, and maybe 8 people in at the time in India, I think we probably were at I was employee 11 or 12, if I'm not mistaken.
And how many are you guys now?
Yeah, we're just over 40 now, full time, with a handful of contractors. So
That's
we're very
exciting.
proud. Yeah, we're very proud in all of our geographies and all of our markets to compensate our consultants above market and provide client-facing opportunities for them, which, if you're an offshore developer, is really not the typical model. So you can see that you can see that we put a lot of pride in our recruiting, our training, and of course retaining top talents. And that's been very helpful for us because the supply of expert resources, at least in the North American market, is far lower than the demand for those resources. So we're well positioned after 6-7 years of operations.
So I'm sorry to keep going back to this, but I'll get into our own conversations here, but I still want to get back to what happened when you got this opportunity to go from, doing the presentations, sitting next to me working on the sales deck presentations to like, was there a certain moment in time where you saw an opportunity, or did they, I know you and your tenacity and your work ethic. I don't think the CEO-ship was just handed to you and you just sat there and accepted. Like, do you remember what kind of happened in that process? I feel like you were in San Francisco when it happened. You had already moved from Chicago. You left us in 2016, if what I recall.
That's right. I at that point in my career, I was willing to take a leap of faith. I joined under contract as an independent contractor in purely a business development role, and with just a willingness to learn and take risks and kind of expand or grow in a direction that I was not going in, leaving Indiana's business school. So. After 3 months as a contractor, I accepted a full-time position running business development, which had many hats: sales, marketing, resource management, all sorts of things that you have to do in a startup.
And you went to New Zealand and Australia too, I remember, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that was at the time where we had a subsidiary and a local director. And interestingly enough, is the 3rd largest install base of customers for Infor software that we service. So there was a strategy there because it was a well-established customer base, but a challenging time zone to operate on. And just because the Australian dollar is a little bit weaker than the US dollar, the economics weren't always the strongest. So in 2018, one of the first things I did after 6 months in the CEO role was close down our Australian sub and focus on opening up in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And why did you do? Was that just because it was more like cost effective to be operating in Canada?
Well, it's not more cost effective, but from an immigration perspective, it was easier to bring our resources to Canada than the United States at that particular time.
So speaking of talking about kind of global resources, can we go into that a little bit more? Have you seen some, like what business trends, I guess, have you seen from this pandemic emerge? I know you and I have talked a little bit about blockchain and consensus. Do you want to maybe dive into that, or I'll let you kind of, have this be more of an open-ended question on the trends that you're seeing?
I wouldn't say that that's a trend it's a trend that exists and is very relevant, but I'd say that's still very much on the bleeding edge. Our business is largely about getting companies and departments within those companies to leave a paper-based or manual business process, digitize that, and transform that into an automated business process. So really moving companies from on paper to a centralized constraints-based system that companies can use to run their business, all the way from orders to general ledger to cash in the bank. So what I would say is that right now, my observation from the start of the year is that companies are spending on digital. The companies that spent on digital transformation before the pandemic fared well last year. And as we're kind of seeing the 2020 numbers come in, we're seeing that there was actually economic growth in the fourth quarter. But many of our customers are not really ready to adopt a decentralized system. They're trying to move their enterprise to a centralized system, a digital platform for growth. So a lot of our work is moving customers that have software deployed on premises and on physical rack space that they own or lease to the cloud. A lot of our work right now is around hybrid cloud and multi-tenant cloud and SaaS, the SaaS model for deploying software.
So you said something really interesting there. To me, a lot of your customers aren't ready for this, right? So the book I've been reading lately, The Obstacle is the Way. As you know, I've been texting you pictures that I've been writing on it. I feel like a lot of us spend so much time being like paralyzed and, being afraid. Like, how did you, being such a new, young CEO without, experiencing any these type of pandemics react, with your team to go from the model you had to whereas now I know you said you guys are fully remote. So, like, how did you guys react? I'm sure you weren't prepared either last year for when March hit.
Well, we've been using Zoom for years, so that wasn't new for us. We were fully set up for remote work. We had that infrastructure in place. I spent much of 2019 trying to set up offices, much like the one I'm in currently.
That's what I remember. I thought you hired people like with the ideas that they were going to have a WeWork office to be going to.
Yeah, that was definitely part of the vision. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition as we thought. But the reality is that we're able to be just as productive from a utilization perspective, from a process perspective, as we were when we were co-locating and sharing office space.
How though? What do you think? Were there any tools or tips? Like, what did you learn, I guess, from this? And how did you motivate your team as much? Because I know that was something, for me on the last what I did with Josh, he was saying, Holly, I see you're trying to do cool events, but the ones in person are just still cooler, and so we're kind of stuck. And that's what, that's why Flex and I even created this series is we realized that a lot of CEOs actually are traveling and we might be able to get their time, So how did you kind of, deal with it, or I guess inspire your employees to stay motivated and to get those same results?
So two things. One, we realized coincidentally and quite fortunately at the board level and at the management level, really what we were good at in the months of January and February before the pandemic fueled lockdown really hit the US and the rest of the world. And that was focusing on what we were good at. And what we were good at was technology projects, integration projects, where we don't need a lot of face-to-face interaction with business users and subject matter experts. So we doubled down on that. And by conducting more projects of that type, we were able to increase our overall consulting activity 30% year over year, which is direct translation into revenue. So it was that kind of focusing on what we're good at and going back to basics almost, as opposed to really expanding and really investing. So the timing of that decision was good. And then one thing I learned really over the course of 2020 was that as a business leader, maybe I'm okay with ambiguity. I'm okay with uncertainty, and I know how to navigate through unstructured scenarios or problems, but perhaps everybody in the company doesn't. So by working with an executive coach, by kind of working with other professionals in my same shoes, we realized we need to implement a system of record and a centralized planning tool from a resourcing perspective that's almost like a digital system for our own business. As we're implementing a solution in our customers' businesses, we realize we need to do that for ourselves. Because from a management perspective, sometimes employees, they have different needs. Some work well with ambiguity, some don't work well with ambiguity. So
yeah, how do you address that? Because I know personally myself, I love white space, make some pizza, a glass of rosé, and I'll build you a wonderful idea, right? But a lot of I don't know if that's something, I just learned from when I was first starting. I worked for, kind of had to learn to manage up. So if you wanted to, I don't know, or I just like white space, I don't really know. I haven't had to really manage anyone on that. Is that something you can mentor? Is it something you can teach?
I look for coachability as really a trait in people that we're bringing onto our team, and relatability. We're in a small organization, just like any community. When you become interconnected, you become interdependent. So it has been a journey, but it's from a recruiting standpoint, from a management standpoint, I've kind of learned that there are so many different personality types and so many different skill sets, and you really need to build diverse teams if you're going to maximize an outcome.
So one thing you said earlier that want to kind of call you on. I'm interested.
Sure.
You said that you pay above market rates.
Mhm.
How do you figure this out? Are you finding out what other people are paying and then you're just paying them more so that you're incentivizing them to work harder? Or can we
Mhm.
talk about that a little bit more?
Well, that was really our recruiting strategy from day one in Bangalore, India. We knew that we would be able to bring technical talent, and consulting services talent from more established and larger organizations where people were kind of stuck, more um, looking to work for a smaller organization, and of course have some of the benefits that come with that, like customer exposure, travel. Basically, it was for some of the people that we were bringing from India on site to our customers, it was unheard of in their previous role to be traveling.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that, right? So one of the things that I've seen that I love is like at hackathons, you get together these developers, let's say any big financial institution, right? And they've never talked before,
Uh,
right? Because they're on the database team and someone's on the UI team. And I had a developer telling me they need more rows of data. I'm like, why? Like, but then he talked to the UI guy and all of a sudden these two people who had never really like connected before had these wonderful ideas because their ideas never, I guess they never got to brainstorm because there was always a business person, right? The business lead that's conveying their ideas. Have you seen that actually having the developers talking to your customers really makes that difference? Because I feel like a lot gets lost in translation, especially if you have the technical people speaking to the
yeah.
business to speaking to technical. It's kind of like, I don't know. That's just my assumption. Have
Mhm.
you noticed any trends there?
Yeah, I think your assumptions is well founded. But if you enable people to go and perform above the role that they're currently at, they will naturally do that. So we
Yeah.
very much encourage in our business to do the job of the person above you if you want that job. And we're very focused on career progression, and kind of providing guardrails around that conversation. So we're proud of the retention that we have across the world. And when I joined in 2016 as a contractor, I'm still working side by side with some of the first guys I met in India and here in the U.S. today. So proud of that fact. Proud of the culture we've built.
That is really great.
Mhm.
Will you talk to me a little bit about something you mentioned recently about a 401k program that you had put together? Can you talk a little bit about what happened there and what were where you guys were and what was the motivators to create this program?
Yeah, so in moving the business back from San Francisco to Chicago last year, I began to do some financial planning of my own, and a big gap in the company was the 401k or Roth 401k program. And I knew that if we were very serious about expanding in the U.S. and retaining talent, and also normalizing the pay scale and the pay range from kind of new joinees to the company as we're pushing um, and entering new areas and hiring at new levels, as well as people who've been in the company 3-4 years. So how do we normalize that, and how do we create sort of a program that um, employees can take advantage of? But really, I mean, we all expect that benefit of retirement savings and a match as we look at competitive job offers. I think last year I remember reading an HR statistic that on average new hires were getting 10 to 15% higher than what the posted salary range was, because there was such a demand for um, skilled or competent managers, executives, or even just individual contributors in a company. Um, and from a competitive standpoint, I knew that we had to do something like that if we were serious about expanding here in the U.S., as I said. So we've generously put a matching program in place, even if employees don't make contributions for whatever personal financial reason. We still want to help them have a tax deferred savings vehicle so that they can kind of grow their personal financial house. So something we're proud of, and it's just about kind of giving back to the employees, which ultimately will turn into a better customer experience for us.
Yeah, and so building this out, as you said, you want to grow in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about what areas you want to grow, and how are you even deciding? Do you have, you mentioned you had a career coach. Like when you're going to make these decisions, do you have a board to go to? Like, let's talk a little bit about like if you were just sitting there, your financial planning that you're doing. What are kind of some of the aspects or?
Before diving into that, I saw some good questions coming in the chat, Holly.
Oh,
And in the
sure.
interest of time, I wanted to make sure we can get to those.
Let's see. Um, I am not seeing it here. You want to go for him, William? I can't even see
Sure,
the question on
sure.
Zoom.
So I like the last one that came through about sort of the importance of diversity and inclusion initiatives, and I'd say that we have a lot of work to do in that realm, as do many companies. But I'll explain kind of my approach to it. Since relocating the head office back here in Chicagoland, it became pretty clear towards the end of 2019 that community was missing in our stakeholder orientation. When you think about a business, you have your partners, your employees, customers, and that's really kind of it. You're thinking really narrow, but especially technology companies, which are kind of almost independent of any company in this cloud computing age. A technology company is, there's no borders to a technology company in this digital age. So it's kind of hard to understand what your community is, or the community in which you operate. And upon relocating back here, we realized that the Midwest is such a hub for manufacturing, distribution, logistics. How can we possibly get involved with companies that are stakeholders in our community? So one of the first things we did was sponsor, at the beginning of 2020, sponsor the Illinois Manufacturers Association as a B2B sponsor around consulting services. And they provide a lot of pro bono legal resources, human resources, HR consulting, IT consulting, and just general other B2B opportunities for small to medium-sized enterprises. And I think there's about a 4,000 member base here in the state of Illinois. So just in summary, I think it's a great question about diversity and inclusion initiatives, but to really even draw a box around that, you have to understand what is the community in which you're operating, and how can you enrich that company with your services, your capital, your time, your resources in any way. So that was really one baby step forward for us in that regard.
And William, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor in this, future of work life. I don't have a computer right now, so I'm on an old iPad. So if you can manage the questions that you see there,
Sure.
that are coming through, because I saw a couple more came through. But
Yeah.
I wanted to point one thing out that I do think that you guys are doing. With everything that you've been saying about actually giving those developers travel and giving those developers FaceTime, like that is diversity and inclusion, right? There's a quote that I really love on diversity and inclusion. It's like, you can be invited to the party, but you're not actually included unless you're asked to dance. But then you have to think about it. Some people don't like to dance. I mean, obviously I have a love for it, but you have to really think, like you were saying, like how do you really motivate your employees? And I just think, I just wanted to commend you guys. I think it's really great that you are giving people opportunities to level up. But yeah, if you want to look through those questions and see if there's any other great gems in there that I can't see.
Sure, there's a couple that's coming through. I'll try to hit these quickly. So what tools do you use to keep team and community congruent across the country and world? I think congruent is such a great word. I'll have to remember to use that one more often. But again, going back to that system we talked about, it's called teamwork. And it's basically a system of record for professional services groups like ourselves. We knew we needed to have a backbone like that. And it's been a process, a painful process, but also a learning process in terms of implementing it. In addition, just really building role clarity. That's something that I've struggled with as a young CEO, and that's kind of dovetails into our next question around change management, growth prospects. How does a CEO handle hyper growth? Right now, our leadership team talks about what do we do to prepare for a phase of hyper growth? What is our company going to look like if we cross a $10 million revenue milestone? And how do we prepare and put the foundation for that in place? So I think role clarity is something that's difficult. Again, going back to the structure versus unstructured, I think people need a lot of clarity around role and responsibility. And that's led some conversations internally around org and structure and how we're going to conduct ourselves if we want to scale both horizontally and vertically. I'll pause the questions from the chat for a moment, Holly, if there's anything on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, no, I just think, the big things that I would say for you is like, and I feel like I've kind of tried to ask you this a few times, but we haven't answered it, is like, what was that cardinal moment that you saw your opportunity? Like when I was at Investment Yodlee, I was constantly finding ways to get more involved, right? I invited SD Jimerson to do one of my first diversity and inclusion events that I did with Flex and Bar Chart. I think it was at Bar Chart that we did. And she came and spoke on our panel. And, for me, like, talking to somebody who I was way levels above me, but I was invited her to speak at my event, got me invited to the Women Leaders Council, then the Women's Initiative Network, right? So I feel like what was kind of, the moment that took you from doing those, presentations to when you actually got the opportunity to lead?
Huh. That's a good question, Holly. I have to think about that one. Can you ask that in a little different way?
Yeah, so I guess it was like, I guess it's like, when did you decide is Flex always says Flex Daily? Like, what was your opportunity when you could have just stayed status quo? When I think it was basically when your buddy decided to start the fundraising piece, and like you could have like, just kind of kept doing what you were doing. But what did you do that put you in line to be the CEO, right? When he
Well,
started
I got
doing
it.
that piece.
I'll admit, we didn't conduct a very extensive executive search. So it wasn't like I had a lot of competition, but really, I think in Eric's mind, it was probably having the relationships. We are 100% a relationship business. And as I said, kind of moving from my first part of my career at JP Morgan to this, it was seeking out that relationship, management and relationship, experience. That's the type of selling that's comfortable to me. I'm not really a technical salesperson. Relationship selling is what comes naturally to me.
Actually, I remember what you said on our prep call that I loved it. You said, when we were talking about something, you said that you decided that you love building relationships, and that if you don't, you said that this role took on needing relationships, but you realized that even if you didn't have them, that you could build them. And it made me feel field of dreams, like, if you build it, they will come. But I mean, you have, especially with the 30% growth year over year last year. So I guess the last thing I would.
We're quite proud of that. And I want to add something before I forget the thought that just popped in my head around what you're talking about. We launched into this conversation about diversity and inclusion, and your experience navigating Yodlee and Investnet, which is really two organizations that came together to serve a broader market. I think I read a statistics on the topic of diversity and inclusion that was talking about upward mobility in a company, whether you're man, woman, of all different colors, creeds, origins. It was kind of aggregating all this data, and it put forth a number close to 60% that as a factor of your upward mobility in an organization's exposure to other parts of the business. And sometimes, especially in a remote work model, it's very hard to get exposure to other parts of the business. If you think about a large bank, you have asset management, investment banking, treasury, retail banking, commercial banking. There's so many different lines of business. How do you get exposure to all of them? And if you look at the senior leadership team of some of the biggest companies, Fortune 500 companies, we'll call them, those are individuals that have experience in different lines of business, sales, accounting, HR, and it's that exposure to multiple parts of the business that really kind of propels the upward mobility. And I know that was something that you had asked me to speak to, Holly. And I don't think there's any one recipe or one formula to follow, but my advice is, as you kind of go through the process of elimination to finding out what you want to do in some future state, you have to have exposure to as many different types of businesses or many different parts of your own business as possible. The good leaders that I know and the good leaders that I look up to know what everybody's doing on the ground floor and all the way in between.
So I guess the last question I would have for you is, I feel like everyone we talked about earlier is like fear could be paralyzing. In the book that I'm reading, The Obstacle is the Way. It's the people that have been really successful have actually, realized how to be successful in spite of that. So would there be any advice that, you have to anyone here, I guess, and how you face that fear from leaving corporate America and join the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, I like whenever I get this question, I think back to kind of a modern day philosopher, Peter Kostenbaum. He wrote a piece around year 2000 that says, do you have the will to lead? And that's a question you kind of have to look at yourself in the mirror every morning and answer. Do you have the will to lead? There's if you do, you're comfortable going where there's anxiety, going where there's uncertainty, going where no one's gone before, and you're comfortable solving the biggest problems. So again, do you that's a question I ask myself. It's a very rhetorical question, but do you have the will to lead? Have you been in leadership positions in the past? Are you seeking that out, or are you seeking to be an individual contributor? In the last year of remote work, the survey data I've read from Boston Consulting Group or from Wall Street Journal has been, there's remote work, people might feel more productive, but maybe that's at the individual contributor or management level. At the executive level, you can see that CEOs and business owners and operators want to bring people back into an office setting because yes, you might be more productive at home on your individual tasks, but it's the collaboration, collaborative setting that's so important for real breakthroughs and real innovation.
Mm-hmm. I
So
agree with you. I missed that part, right? But like, I've always been remote, but we used to do once every 3 months. I would go to the office in Redwood Shores, and we would actually meet because you're right. There's just something different about that dynamic. But before we dive into that, I think Flex was sending us some messages. Do you want to take a look at the chat? I feel like he said
sure.
there's
Yeah, I think
questions to look at.
just looking at the engagement and participation, Flex suggests we go the full hour. In which case, I'll try to turn the lights back on in here.
Flex has no consideration for the sunlight time, William. But I agree. I would love to hear these questions that are going on, but unfortunately, I'm stuck on my iPad, so I'm going to have to ask you to do me a favor and drive over there. But that way,
Sure
I'm
thing.
kind of letting you cheat because you get to see what questions you get to answer. So
there's a lengthy question about building relationships, and with that in mind, how do you better your own interpersonal leadership style for a non-Doppio employee? What are you good at? What are you looking to improve? What am I looking to improve? I think the level of consciousness and awareness in our own organization. That's kind of a buzzword. I participate loosely with a group here called Conscious Capitalism in Chicago, and that's really about people understanding what is the real bottom line here. What are we doing? Are we just trying to extract profit, or are we trying to take our community forward? And do we have a level of consciousness within ourselves and within our own organizations that's providing for a healthy place to provide feedback? I think the remote work, again touching on that point again, has really eliminated or hindered the ability to give real-time valuable feedback.
you said earlier something about relatable and coachable. So I feel like that's kind of goes right into this. Like, what is relatable and coachable for Doppio Group? Like, does it depend on the role, or does can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, it depends on the role, and really what we look for is people's innate ability to understand our customers, right? Without our customers, there is no business. Without their business, we don't have a business. So we try to foster a high level of awareness around what's happening at our customer sites. For example, I'm high in a certain personality dimension called Fact Finder, so I try to relay every possible bit of information I know about a customer, a particular individual we're working with, to really set a stage for how to best interact or interface with him or her. So that's just my style and how I try to support the team and try to make everybody most aware of not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it. What's the purpose, right? You can write a few lines of code and say you're done with something, but why are we doing it? What's the purpose?
I love that. I love that. So you get them involved in the mission, right? Like, you feel like instead of they're just doing point A to B, you actually let them know where they're going. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we hope that translates to bottom line results. We're not just a profit center. We're not here only to make high margins and cash flow. We're here to build better businesses, and that's not something that I've let go of in search of this role.
Well, and so building better businesses, it sounds like you're really trying to build out a safe and place for people to grow. Where are you guys growing? Like you said, you're growing in the U.S. Like, if people are listening in and would want to know if they should apply to Doppio Group, what types of roles might you be considering?
Sure, we're looking to hire at the solution architect level, at the senior technical consultant level, or technical.
What types of technologies, William?
Largely ERP, business processes, plus would be skills around Infor and Infor ERP. Very hard to hire motivated talent. So just before the lockdown last year, we put together an expensive and lengthy training program, trying to take people with a little bit of relevant experience and put them to work on the line as far as providing real business consulting services. We really need both sides. I mentioned at the beginning, historically, we haven't been very focused on functional or business consulting, and really our reputation in the market is around technical services and integration services. But you can't really grow without having that full understanding, the full awareness of why we're building this integration. What is the business process we're trying to automate, and what is, the ultimate financial benefit? How do we measure our performance? So,
And how do you?
well, ROI is the easiest way, right? ROI is the easiest way. But as I said, a lot of the companies we serve don't have the ability to handle these tasks, deal with these issues internally. Think about a manufacturer located outside of a major metro area. It's probably hard to recruit and retain top talent. So we try to fill by plugging a gap in the way our companies resource day-to-day operations and manage day-to-day operations from a business process standpoint, as well as conduct big capital projects like implementations.
Why don't we bring it down a level? What's the Jelly Belly stuff about? Like, I know that
Yeah.
let's bring it I get what you're saying, but I'm just trying to think of how we can bring it full circle. And so tell us the use case for the Jelly Belly.
Yeah, sure. Jelly Belly Candy Company, location here in North Chicago, as well as the headquarters in Fairfield, California. Very proud of this customer relationship. I did not build it, but have helped grow it and nurture it over time, and have a good relationship with Jelly Belly, which is a family-owned company like many of our customers. It really began by solving one simple problem. How do we accept credit card orders in a PCI compliant way, or complying with regulations around capturing personal card information?
Oh, that sounds like my world.
Yeah, it is. It does touch on that a little bit as well. But it was just about solving a problem for a customer. And once we built confidence we can solve that problem, we were allowed to solve other problems. And today we kind of manage the B2B orders via a data interchange format called EDI, or electronic data interchange. And we play a role where we sit from a business process standpoint between shipping, warehousing, logistics, accounts receivable, and finance, and the customer service team. And that's something that people, we have such a B2C mindset as consumers. Customer service, oh, that's someone here to help me when I have a complaint. But in a B2B enterprise or a manufacturing distribution company, that's the person who's entering orders and making sure that the customer orders are flowing through the system correctly. So they're a key piece from a revenue recognition standpoint in terms of capturing those dollars, which are largely on credit terms, and then at some point in the near future, applying cash against those open invoices or open AR. So that's what we do for Jelly Belly.
Can you tell us another one? Give us another company that people might know, or maybe when people don't, another use case. I feel like there's a lot of different things you do, and I don't want to get too bogged down in the technology piece and try and make it a little bit more relatable.
We play a similar role for other recognizable companies like Brooks Running Shoes or Red Wing Shoes that make the boots.
Oh, okay.
As well as a lot of food and beverage, not just confectionery, but actually food and beverage, like protein processors. One of the largest fully cooked fajita beef and chicken manufacturers in the United States is our customer. We just help them go live in their main facility on this system of record.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And
when was that?
Yeah. Well, I want to make an interesting point though, before I forget. In 2020, remember I said we made a board level decision to really go back to basics and focus on what we're good at. Mm-hmm. That was a wise decision at the time because we were trying to get hyper focused on food and beverage as an industry vertical. But we also serve equipment rental, distribution, fashion and apparel, chemicals and life sciences as well. So wow. by focusing on the application layer, the database layer, and the integration layer of the system we service, we were able to work across industries in 2020, which kind of helped us diversify a little bit. Projects that were delayed or stalled for a couple of months, we had very active customers who saw demand shocks in their business that we needed to help kind of manage to. While others customers, especially in some of our distribution customers that were getting product from China to distribute around North America and the world, they had tremendous supply shocks. So how from just a supply chain management perspective, we saw total results across the board. But what it taught us or told us was that we are an essential partner to our customers in terms of helping them run their business.
So I want to talk a little bit about this because I don't know much about the blockchain world with supply chain, but I did hear some really cool examples from one of my friends that was talking to me about the terms of some of the food and beverage. He was saying that there's some coffee plants and lettuce. He even told me there was seafood where they're actually using blockchain. So you have a permanent financial ledger, so you know all the steps of the way. And one company that he had told me was actually using seafood, and they found out that the crates had been sitting on the beach for like a couple of days. So then they switched their supplier. They had fresher seafood, better returns. Do you see this trend like a lot, or is it just like you said, it's at the bleeding edge? I know you mentioned that earlier, but are you seeing it being used in this way, or is there other use
I
cases
think
I'm
the
not
best.
familiar with?
I think you highlighted the best, most relevant use case to us, which is traceability and safe quality food. So we have a lot of food and beverage companies have a lot of regulations they need to adhere to from an SQF or safe quality food standpoint. And yes, blockchain would really help from a visibility standpoint, especially for when product recalls are need to be made. I think Walmart might be leading the way with some of their consulting partners on adopting an Ethereum-based blockchain solution. But you know, Holly, I have to be honest. The challenge to that is, you know, for that to work, you need to have all of your information in your system cleansed, standardized, and digitized if you're going to participate in a blockchain. So we're helping customers get to that digital platform.
Interesting. So that's a use. Okay.
Yeah, as a platform for growth. I think blockchain is super relevant and will become more widely adopted. However, we need to be in a fully digital world for that to be the case. And if you walk around the warehouses that I do or see some of the manufacturing operations that I have, you'll see that it's not fully digital.
Okay, well, let's take one more question from the questions, William, and then we're gonna, since we're already a little bit over our time here, let's do one more from the audience, and then everyone, if you guys do have additional questions, you know, feel free to reach out to Flex, myself, and we can get you in touch with William.
Yeah, I want to go back to one that was just a practical question. One was just how often is too often for role clarity and org chart change? I think role clarity discussions are super important. We try to align that with OKRs or objectives and key results as sort of a goal setting mechanism that informs how we organize ourselves as a resource team, as a resource pool, really. I don't know what's too often. I think certainly before key individuals are hired, you have to know exactly where they're going to fit in your organization. If you're hiring externally, you can leave no uncertainty in terms of what their place is in the organization, and really make it clear what it is that they do. So the question about how often you do it, I would say, how often are you hiring? Are you on a rolling recruiting plan, or are you guys kind of hiring in chunks as the business expands and kind of being in a reactive state? So I don't think I think it's a living organism, the org chart, and it needs to be taken care of and kind of nurtured. The last question was, are you looking to hire talents in other continents such as South America and Africa? Really, for us, it's more about aligning resources to time zone. We don't have any customers that are operating really in Europe or Central Asia. Not familiar with the resourcing pool in Africa. As far as South America, I've known, or I've heard from some peers in the industry that there's tremendous technical talent there, and the benefit is that it's the same time zone as North America most often than not.
Well, I think you should definitely take a look at South Africa, William. That's one thing I've been hearing a lot going on down there in terms of fintech, and it seems like there's a lot more crossovers that you and I are going to have to discuss the next time life is safe and we're all traveling and, you know, in Chicago in a wine bar somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for your time today. As you know, I've seen from working with Mala, storytelling truly does inspire, and in this age of the pandemic, you know, that's what we're trying to do here is, you know, give everyone stories that, you know, I mean, last year in the pandemic, you still grew your business 30%,
Yeah.
you know, so
a lot of other businesses did, right? So it's
Mhm.
good about understanding where they fit and what they did, and these types of conversations are great to help get that information out to a bigger audience.
It really has been a really wonderful discussion. Just wanted to say goodbye from me and the child. Hope you guys all have a wonderful time. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we will have next month, we're actually going to have Flex on deck. So I will be interviewing my co-founder next month. So stay tuned. We'll have dates and more information coming to you soon. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for the opportunity. Speak soon, guys.